From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And a good morning to you. Welcome to Sunday Edition. And some Utah students are already back in school. Others have just days left of their summer break. We're going to talk about that. Ahead on the program, we'll be visiting with the state superintendent, Sydney Dixon, about the steps that teachers and administrators are taking to ensure that we have a good school year. There's also ongoing health concerns, and we'll be talking with the Department of Health here in the state of Utah. Rich Lakin will be joining us. We'll get an update on COVID and things that parents and the kids themselves can do so we're all safe. But we start with breaking news this week, certainly political news. The FBI serving a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, former President Trump's residence in Florida. Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing that he filed a motion with Florida officials to unseal the warrant and property receipt from the search. He said the decision came after the former president himself confirmed that he confirmed there was a search. Saw the public interest in the case. Some Republicans quickly siding with President Trump, our former president, and calling it a politicized raid. I'm very appreciative of my friend Boyd Matheson joining us. Just barely got off his show, and in light of how quickly things are unfolding, Boyd, we record this segment on Friday afternoon. Who knows when this airs on Sunday morning what will have occurred on this particular story. So I thought we'd just get right to it. You know, I'm hearing things, unprecedented raid. That came from a U.S. representative, a conservative commentator, and this one just floored me. Tomorrow is war. And then some of the suggestions that generated on what we ought to do to the FBI and members of the FBI, and then even from the minority leader in the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, we're weaponizing the FBI. Oh my goodness, Boyd, you and I have had many discussions in this arena. I always wonder if the shoe were on the other foot.
Yeah. And
we were talking about maybe things that were held by Hillary Clinton, as we did in 2018 and prior to that. What the rhetoric may be the same, but they would have been the same words very well may have been coming from different lips on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, and I think one of the lessons we've failed to learn in this country is that words have meaning and the meaning matters, and we have to get to that. And I think one of the other things, especially in a case like this where things are moving so quickly, we live in this world of instant access to information, and everybody wants to be instantly certain on they're doing evil or this person is doing it bad or they have bad intentions. Just literally within an hour of the affidavits and the warrants being publicized, I had things in my inbox, fundraising emails from Republicans, fundraising emails from Democrats, weaponizing those very same words. And this whole idea of instant certainty, we need to remember instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it undermines trust. And so one of the things we have to learn, it's a lesson I learned after several interviews with Bob Woodward, of course, Washington Post fame and Watergate fame. He said, Boyd, restraint always works. Yeah. And that's how we get to that trust. And I think one of the things that I'm most worried about in our country, we've stress tested this nation under all kinds of things, pandemics, world wars, economic collapse. We have never stress tested this nation in the absence of trust. Trust in our institutions of government, trust in one another. And I think we're headed for that kind of test as a country. And we have to trust process. We have to trust those people. And this kind of weaponizing of words from both sides of the political aisle does nothing to help that.
It was several weeks ago we all saw the poll that came out regarding American institutions. I had our friend Rick Larson on from Sutherland Institute, and we were laughing when, you know, years ago, how could the Congress have only 17% approval rating? Well, now, minus 10. And it sadly goes right up the food chain. You know, when we talk about the weaponizing of words and we talk about the instant certainty, I heard you replay on your radio program some of the conversation with Woodward, and where he talked about having the editor, Ben Bradley in this case, saying, yeah, okay, you think it's ready for publication. I don't. I want more sources. I want more facts. Yeah. Who in this world today, in the environment that you and I are operating, who is coming up to you to go, I want more certainty, I want you to hold off, I want more facts? It hardly ever happens.
That's right, and sadly with social media, everybody's just one click and one push button away, and you have that instant rage and that anger, fear, and frustration. And I always kind of chuckle thinking of Ben Bradley, you know, walking around the newsroom slapping the copy, you know, saying, no, you don't have it yet, you got to get more. And who is doing that today? I always say everybody needs an editor. Some of us need vocal editors as we go through the day. But Ben Bradley had that discipline. Even back then, there was still that rush to be first, to be the one to break the story. And again, sometimes that undermines our ability to actually get to the truth.
Boyd, we could talk for hours about this, but maybe you could leave us with some hope. I'm a great believer in this country. I'm a great believer in our institutions, even when we're questioning a few at a rather drastically low state right now. But Woodward mentioned that, how optimistic he was about the country. I hear that from John Meacham. I hear it. And we've only got about a half a minute, but leave us with a little hope.
Yeah, no, there's great hope. And while our politics have failed in this country, America will not. And it's because of places like Utah and communities like we have here, where we can have real conversation about the real issues, that we can set the politics aside, that we can talk about issues that matter, even issues that are really uncomfortable for us to get to. But we can get to those conversations, but we have to have trust in each other. It's not just trust in institutions of government. You got to trust your neighbor.
That's right.
You got to trust your community.
Boyd, it's always a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you so much. My friend Boyd Matheson with us here on Sunday Edition. We'll be right back with Dr. Sidney Dixon to talk all things back to school. Gone in a flash. That's what a lot of parents, and most likely their kids too, are saying about the summer break. Students in southern Utah went back to school on Thursday. Others have just days left, and we wanted to get a report card on the readiness of our teachers and our administrators welcoming back students right now. And we're delighted to have the State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Sidney Dixon, with us. And Doctor, thank you so much for being part of the program. And what is the state of education right now in regards to going back to school?
Well, we've had a few years of just what seems to be sheer craziness. And this year, as I've been out and about with teachers and with students, especially this last week as they're all gearing up, there's so much energy and enthusiasm and excitement. People are looking forward to a year that's absent of a lot of the things that we've been dealing with. So we're ready. We're ready to have kids back and families engaged and ready to start. I think we're geared up to have a year where we're focused on all the right things for students. We're not so focused on health, although that's always important, but we're really focused on providing ways for students to succeed.
Is COVID still anywhere near the factor that it was, and how high up on the scale is it?
Well, it's still there, certainly, and it's still spreading, but we know more than we used to. And with every variant, we have different ways to mitigate the virus and pay attention to it. And we're so grateful for our public health partners because they're right in there with us and helping us know how to mitigate the virus. So it's still present. Kids will still be absent, but we believe that families know how to prevent and care. Schools will be clean. We have new protocols in place. So all of those things will still be happening for sure.
We look at everything from just the notices we see on every business that we walk into, some apologizing that we're now closing on this day, or we're closing early, or we have limited hours because of the ability to find people who can and would like to work in their establishments. And then we have the unemployment rate in the state of Utah, which is just at record lows right now. For quite a few years, we've talked about the shortage of teachers, the shortage of bus drivers, everything. Right. Where do we stand as far as staffing our schools?
This is a hard year. We have people who have been in positions for a number of years, like paraeducators to support our students in the classroom, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, all of these great, important roles that help the ecosystem of school happen. And those are the positions that are hardest to fill. We have, for the first time in many years, empty elementary classrooms around the state where we've had a hard time getting elementary teachers. About 15% of our teachers in the state are in classrooms without what we would call typical certification. You know, they're coming to us and not fully qualified, fully certified, but willing to get in and get the training and show up and serve our students. So we're just in a different space than we've been ever before, and our schools are having to find creative ways to try and make sure all of those essential services are filled for our students.
I'm sure this varies from district to district, but is there a common thread of individuals that are drastically needed in almost all of our school districts?
Yes, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, paraeducators, people who support in the classroom. That's consistent across the state. We have a very small rural district where they don't have a cafeteria worker, bus driver, or paraeducator. They have a teacher with a lot of students ready to come back. So they're having to think about a variety of ways to get students there and to support them. We have very large districts, and you've heard those reports and reported them on your station, where they are missing cafeteria workers, bus drivers in every school. And of course, the recent news, which is awesome news, about UTA working with Salt Lake School District to provide free UTA passes, which is such a great strategy.
I was going to ask about that because it was last Friday that was making news that Mayor Aaron Mendenhall had announced that for students of the Salt Lake City School District, and it's going on kind of in phases, but I think the first 1,000 or thereabouts went out, where this is not a total pass, you know, for ski passes and things, but I understand for a little upgrade, students can even get that. But what a great thing for these kids to have access to our mass transit system for their lives, but particularly for school.
Right, because transportation impacts the entire family. And we want students to be there on time. We want them to be there every day. This is something that we've noticed over the past couple of years. Attendance has been an issue, not just COVID related, but students, when school shut down in 2020, students were used to not coming to school. And so we've seen attendance be on the decline, and that's something of great concern. If you take the element of transportation issues out of that, then you're more likely to get families and students to school. So it's a community effort, and we so appreciate Mayor Mendenhall seeing that effort, that it's not just about the responsibility of the family, but it really is a community effort to get kids to school on time and provide the services they need.
The Salt Lake City School District is a little unique in that it's very well serviced by mass transit compared to some other areas, certainly of the state and even the Wasatch Front. Getting the kids, sometimes it's called the last mile, I'll call it the last block or two. What is being done by the school district, and what is being suggested to make sure the kids get safely from the mass transit hub or wherever to their school?
That's probably a question more for Salt Lake District. We wouldn't have a state plan for that. That would be very local. Some of the things they could do, of course, is have a bus or vans meet students there, additional crossing guards depending on the distance. So I'm sure that they will have support personnel in place to make sure that there's a safe transition.
As you look at the entire state, and everybody talks about the teachers' responsibilities and, well, the administrators and those who work in various aspects of education, what about parents? What is our role, grandparents in my case, but what is our role now in making sure this is a great, a good, and a safe school year?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Parents are such an important part of the equation, and we want authentic partnerships with parents. We have one thing in common as educators with parents. Many, if not most of us, are parents, but parents drop their students off at the door. They expect them to be safe, well cared for, and taught well. They expect them to get a quality education. The parent part of that equation is that authentic partnership of the school communicating with the parent and the parent doing their part to make sure students are on a routine of getting enough sleep, getting the right nutrition, in homework routines. Our families are busy. The kids are very busy nowadays, and those routines are so helpful. Reading with your children and to your children, and making sure that you have conversations about school. What's the typical response? A kid comes home from school, parents say, how was school today? Depending on the age of the student, you might have a lot of enthusiasm. As they get older, the shoulders get higher. But asking the right kinds of questions to really delve in and find out what's working, what's not working, what are they learning, how are they applying it, and then extending that learning at home. And grandparents play a really important role. You know, it was my grandmother who taught me to read, because she would read with me and to me. And I think it's really important for grandparents to understand that when they're enthusiastic and supportive about education, that rubs off on grandchildren. So you too, Doug, have a really important role to play.
Thank you. Superintendent, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you being on the show. I've appreciated your friendship, and here's to a great school year.
I have confidence it's going to be great. Thank you.
We'll take just a brief break, and we will come right back. We'll talk about COVID and what impact that will have on our schools. We'll be checking in with the Department of Health coming up next. The return to the classroom comes with an increased risk of COVID. The vicious virus is still very present in our communities, and the Utah Department of Health is tracking that for us. Our next guest on the program today is Rich Lakin, Immunization Program Manager for the department. And Rich, what are you seeing? What is the department seeing in terms of transmission as we're launching our kids back into a school year?
Well, we had seen kind of a higher transmission here in the last couple of weeks, but I was in a meeting this morning and they've shown that the transmission is kind of going down a little bit. However, just a word of caution, that doesn't mean that that it's not spreading. It means that, you know, we have more people testing at home, and so our data is a little bit, you know, could be a little bit off where, you know, if we have 4,000 cases, it could be more like 6,000 cases.
Mm-hmm. How are the kids faring when they do get the virus? How nasty is it for them? What kind of things should we look for with our kids, especially again with school looming? So
kids are still, you know, being impacted. I think that's kind of a misconception that what a lot of Utahns believe, but you know, many of them, you know, will kind of get through this okay. However, there will be some that will be severely sick. There will be some that will be hospitalized. And I think that's the main key, is just to remember that, you know, this doesn't just affect the old, but it will affect kids as they go back to school. And especially as they, you know, start to mingle in closer quarters, you know, there could be a lot more cases when they all go back to school.
Doors have opened, gateways have opened for our kids now to be immunized. How strong a recommendation is the Department of Health are you giving for parents to get their kids immunized?
Well, we're making a very strong recommendation for the kids to get immunized. And I say that because vaccines have shown that it does have a very high rate of keeping people from becoming severely ill or being hospitalized as compared to those that have not been vaccinated. So, you know, with those 6 month to 4 year age groups, we have a pretty low rate of those that have been vaccinated. As they go back to school, we could see more hospitalizations, and we could see more severe illness with these school kids if we don't see more of them vaccinated. So as a department, we're making a high recommendation for sure for them to be vaccinated.
As educators reach out to you now and, of course, through the school year, asking for good advice and what teachers and administrators and those who work within our schools can watch out for, what advice do you give them as we all try to watch out for one another, but especially going back to school, our kids?
Well, I think some of the best advice would be, you know, if you're sick, don't go to school, you know, even if it's not COVID. And I know it's difficult for, you know, working parents. I've been in that same situation. If they're sick, don't send them to daycare. And, you know, not only are we going to have COVID floating around, but we're going to have influenza season. And so we've got, you know, 2 diseases that are spreading around. And the best way to keep all of them safe is that when somebody is not feeling well, keep them home and try to keep them away from others, so that at least we have a very slow spread instead of a rapid spread across our school districts.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, the regular influenza season, the flu and so on. What is anticipated? Sometimes we get little prognostications on what it looks like for the flu season. What does it look like, if we know at this point? And how does that commingle with COVID? And boy, you know, for the average parent or grandparent, in my case, to watch out and be able to tell the difference or know what's going on seems to be a real challenge.
Yeah, so I haven't seen any indication yet of what kind of flu season we're going to have. As we look to the southern hemisphere, they match up the flu vaccine as well as they can with the quadrivalent vaccine, meaning it's going to cover 4 types of strains. Hopefully, the flu virus does very little changing, and that when it reaches us, that the vaccine itself will be very protective. We'd like to see at least a 60, maybe to 70% protective. Unfortunately, with any virus, they change very rapidly, and the flu is no different. And when it comes to COVID and the flu, really the only way you can tell is to be tested, because most likely you'll have flu-like symptoms when you get COVID. One distinct thing for COVID will be the taste and smell. So you can pretty much, if you've lost your taste and smell, that is very one indicator that it will be very COVID specific and that you don't have the flu.
What about the testing? Let's talk about that. At first, it was such a scramble, and I can remember when Dee and I got our first test out at the Maverick Center, even the Utah National Guard, and by the way, they were terrific, as were the healthcare providers who were there. But it was such a big deal and a time-consuming situation. Now, most of us have some COVID tests even in our homes. How much do you advise that we do that, and how accurate are they?
Yeah, so we're kind of in a different period of COVID testing right now, where before, you would go to many places across the state of Utah and you would be tested. For myself, to just kind of give you an example, when my wife and I had it, I knew I had COVID, and so we just got some home tests and we tested, and then we when we found out we were positive, we just isolated ourselves, within our house. A lot of that's probably the way it's going to be. There will be many places where you can go to get tested, but like for myself, just the convenience of home testing was the right thing for me. But really, it's up to parents and how they would like to test.
Sure. Rich, we so appreciate your expertise. Thank you for joining us today on Sunday Edition. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We hope you have a great week. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And music and the spoken word, that's coming up next.